Okay, hi, this is James Governor at RedMonk TV, and I'm lucky to be here to interview Richard Nicholson, the CEO and founder of Paremus, a UK startup doing some really interesting things in terms of provisioning, building large-scale distributed systems. I think you could probably articulate a little bit better what Paremus actually does. So Richard, tell me a bit about Paremus, where you came from and the problems you're trying to solve.
Okay, thank you James for that intro. Paremus really was born from a set of engineers that worked in the finance industry in the early, late 90s. We've worked in some very large distributed environments and been one of the early adopters in the client-server distributed network type runtime infrastructures. And really in 2001, Paremus was set up to move that whole story forwards. Initially we were interested in the utility storage, server infrastructure, stack, runtime. But the question changed really in 2004, 2005 to the following. Given that data centers are moving to modular, lights out, blade-centric, convergent network architectures, which is taking a little bit longer than we thought it was, but it's definitely happening, what does the runtime need to look like to deal with that world? And really we wanted a solution where we could dynamically plug in new compute resource, let compute resource fail, and the whole system would just run. No centralized command and control, all distributed, self-organizing. And so it was really those background drivers which had been driving Paremus.
You're not trying to deliver magic, are you? That sounds
it was pretty close at the time, to be honest. I mean, you know, we came at the whole issue from a very different side of the industry. At the time in the early mid-2000s, people were talking about grid, they were talking about web services and JEE, but to us that was still very much just the same old. It was a static stovepiped infrastructure where you had your nailed down services in a static runtime environment. And we really didn't see how that was going to deal with how the world was changing. And this was pretty much pre-cloud in many ways, the thing that we're trying to do. And so we really started from the fundamentals. How do we build a self-organizing command and control framework? How do we deploy applications and assemble those in that framework? And so around about 2005 we realized that whilst we had some really good fundamental patterns, what we really needed were industry standards that we could hook these ideas into.
I would just stop you briefly. I'm just kind of trying to get a sense for, you know, clearly sometimes we come at a problem with the sort of the middleware perspective, sometimes from the ops perspective.
Yep.
Could you say a little bit, and it might be worth saying a bit about who you see as perhaps the competition at that point, or what are the sort of the categories? And I appreciate that you're trying to build a new one in a sense,
yeah.
But whereabouts do you fit in the data center universe?
Then or now?
Then, I think, and then you can talk about
so then it was very difficult to categorise what we were doing, I mean, to be fair. We did go out and try and leverage the cloud type environment because clouds were distributed, even though it was very simple sort of distributed compute type.
But you weren't going to find any standards in the cloud, obviously.
But it was a very difficult industry. The GGF and those sorts of bodies weren't really generating standards that were relevant to the enterprise in general. We did join the enterprise grid, I can't remember the name of the group actually, EGA? Enterprise Grid Association or whatever they were.
There were more than one, I believe.
Yes, but again, they were sort of lost in a whole sea of standards from SIM all the way through the stack to how they work with GGF. And then we had web services and Java EE on the side and all of this sort of swimming around. What we've seen since that point is actually a clarification, I think, of the industry.
Okay.
We were very early adopters in OSGI. So in 2005, we needed a modularization, a modular framework to work with. We'd been playing with our own sort of concept before that, and we decided to adopt OSGI. Previous to that, it had only been used in the telco, home automation, these sorts of places. What people have been seeing over the last 2 years is a massive move forwards by the industry, backed by IBM and Oracle and via the OSGI Alliance, but a move into the enterprise space. And I think it's fair to say that today all of the current application servers that are out there are either OSGI based, WebSphere has been for a while, or are moving that way.
Yep.
But in terms of fundamental architectural patterns, it's still somewhat old world.
Yes.
In terms of you have these siloed pieces of functionality that the user has to place into a static environment, a static data center, and wire together your business systems with ESBs and whatever.
Exactly. There's probably a difference between being OSGI compliant
Yep.
and being truly built on OSGI.
Exactly, and there's a difference between OSGI compliant, built on OSGI, and the sort of architectures, runtimes that you build using OSGI. So you can you can use OSGI and you can build a classic J infrastructure with ESB middleware, and it will look pretty much the same as a system 10 years ago. It's just built using reusable components. Or you can build a distributed, self-scaling, self-repairing runtime infrastructure, which is much more, use the phrase now, cloud-like in its very essence. And I think this is one of the interesting things in the industry at the moment, is convergence between modularization coming in from the software development side and cloud computing coming in from the resource reutilization side. And we happen to find ourselves at sort of that hotspot at the moment in terms of how do you build dynamic applications which are running on a dynamic resource landscape, which may be changing, which may be hybrid, partly in the enterprise, partly external to the enterprise. And that really changes the nature of how you architect systems. You no longer have centralized fixed points, it needs to be much more self-organizing. So going back to the middleware question, are we a middleware-centric company? Well, it depends how you define middleware in a sense. So, we are a runtime company, we're a platform as a service, OSGI, cloud-based. But we don't mandate things like the middleware infrastructure that you use. We're not JMS or Java Space or web services centric, for example. You can use whichever protocols or middleware components you want to on the fabric. That's a design decision for the enterprise architect.
And can I choose my own containers? Do I have to adopt your runtimes?
You could, if you really wanted to, use a different container than Nimble, and Robert Dunn later will be talking about Nimble. I'd be surprised if you'd want to do that having used Nimble, as it's a very simple to use, very sophisticated and elegant OSGI runtime. But yes, you could. Nimble understands that perhaps you have a preference for something else, and it could keep you happy.
Tell me a bit more about what Nimble is, how you want to sell it, and what you see as your go-to-market this year.
We're sort of split in two in terms of the product sets at the moment. So we have the Service Fabric, which is this distributed, self-managing runtime infrastructure for really next generation data center. And then we have the Nimble, which is like the engine on each node, and we've decided to market Nimble individually as well. So Nimble in a way is a little bit like Spring VM on steroids, if you think of it that way. That sort of gives you a good idea of what that's about. Nimble has been put out to market to attract people who want to develop in OSGI. It has a great set of tooling, and Robert will talk about this later. They can pull it down, and it makes the whole modularization process much simpler to use and that sort of thing. The Service Fabric, on the other side of the equation, we're actually finding people are coming to us and finding us having searched for a modular runtime which is cloud-centric for the enterprise. And so we're still really in the phase of the early adopters across industry verticals that are interested in moving forwards. They've had it with the infrastructure they've had over the last 10 to 15 years. You want to significantly drive down OpEx within their environments, and they're willing to start a phase change in the way they do that. Not necessarily looking for a silver bullet that people come to us. They say, we want to change things fundamentally. And we see that we see cloud, we see a lot of noise around it and also a lot of architecture around it, but we can sort of see where it's going, and we see OSGI, and we want this runtime solution which in 2 to 3 years' time is going to give me lights out runtime.
It's kind of interesting to me that you're still positioning runtime in a sense, just when it seems to be that Nimble, as much as anything else, or at least the big problem in OSGI that needs solving, is one thing to say, we'll have a modular Java, but managing dependency in that is a really tough problem.
So the thing is that the dependency breaks down into 2 parts, and there's an interesting blog by Bertman, Kurt, I've forgotten his second name actually, who deals with this. There's the modular dependency, the relationship between the artifacts that you want to get to run, and the dependency between those and the runtime environment in which you run.
Yes.
Now, Nimble running in the Service Fabric is much more about the whole runtime. So from an operational perspective, I want to roll in new compute resource, I want to remove compute resource, I want it to be self-managing, which means that services may move around and re-optimize themselves. So that's the big picture. Nimble in itself is focused on our showing modularization and making that simple as possible.
Right.
And that's the other side of it.
Okay.
And bringing them together gives us the full capability.
Okay, well that makes a lot of sense. You've got the sort of the simpler, kind of an endpointy kind of story, and then you've got the big fabric story.
That's right, enterprise and developer OSGI, so we'll make it easy for you to build OSGI applications, but this is ideally the runtime you'd like to run it on.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, and that's another fun and exciting episode of RedMonk TV.